This is from Take two. This is from Whispers from Eternity by Paramhansa Yogananda. This is in the section Invocations to the Manifestation of God in the Temples of Great Lives. He begins first with a tribute to his Guru. Thou light of my life, thou camest to spread wisdom's glow over the path of my soul. Centuries of darkness dissolved before the shafts of thy luminous help. As a naughty baby, I cried for my divine mother, and she came to me as my Guru, Swami Sri Yukteswar. At that meeting, O my Guru, a spark flew from thee, and the faggots of my God-craving, gathered through incarnations, smoldered and blazed into bliss. All my questions have been answered with thy flaming golden touch. Eternal, ever-present satisfaction has come to me through thy glory. My Guru, thou voice of God, I found thee in response to my soul cries. Slumbers of sorrow are gone, and I am awake in bliss. If all the gods are displeased, yet thou art pleased. I am safe in the fortress of thy pleasure. And if the gods protect me behind the parapets of their blessings, yet I receive not thy benedictions. I am an orphan, left to pine spiritually in the ruins of thy displeasure. O Guru, thou didst bring me out of the bottomless pit of darkness into the paradise of peace. Our souls met after years of waiting. They trembled with an omnipresent thrill. We met here because we had met before. Together we will fly to his shores, where we will smash our planes of finitude forever and vanish into infinite life. I bow to thee as the spoken voice of silent God. I bow to thee as the divine door which leads to the temple of salvation. I bow to thee, to thy master, Lahiri Mahashaya, harbinger of yoga in Benares, and I lay the flowers of my devotion at the feet of Babaji, our supreme master. Sorry if you couldn't hear that, if the mic was off. So this week's reading is, Do You Need a Guru? See, I'm just kidding. Just to make it fair. Okay. It's just amazing. I turn it off every time thinking, now I will not forget to turn it back on. We only turn it off because how it sounds when it's being adjusted. To us it sounds like ee, but in the microphone it sounds a lot louder than that. And so we turn it off, but then have to turn it back on. So, do you need a guru? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. Many people scoff at the idea of having a guru. True to human nature generally, they make a virtue of their scoffing. I am responsible for what I do, they announce, responsible for my mistakes as well as for my victories. What would I ever learn if I handed over my development to someone else? To depend on another for guidance would be an act of spiritual cowardice. It would be understandable for someone gifted with some trivial ability, for instance with words, to insist on doing his crossword puzzle himself, without letting anyone else help him. But supposing, even in such trivial matters, he had no such gift, what virtue would there be in refusing to learn? For that matter, moreover, where do our gifts come from? They are not a native ability. Still, crossword puzzles are hardly an important challenge. What if a person wanted to do something daring, to climb a cliff, for instance, but refused to study the art of mountain climbing? He would climb at the risk of his life. And how much more is risked than physical life in the great adventure of the divine search, where the risk is to salvation itself? Where is the sacrifice in seeking guidance? Even a mountain guide wouldn't presume to do one's climbing for one. His purpose would only to be to help the neophyte to climb safely. To have a wise guru is not a sign of weakness, but of plain common sense. All the saints, aware as they are of the hazards of the adventure, agree on the importance of having a guide or guru. And these are the heroes speaking, not cowards or spiritual weaklings. Jesus emphasized the importance of having a teacher by asking John to baptize him. In the Gospel of St. Matthew, we read of his coming to John. Thus, Jesus said to John, "It becometh us to fulfill all righteousness." In the Bhagavad Gita, the 4th chapter, Sri Krishna says, "Open thyself to those who have attained wisdom. They will be thy teachers. Ask questions of them, both verbally and mentally. Serve them faithfully and with devotion." How is the devotee to recognize one who has attained wisdom? The Bhagavad Gita gives this inspiring description of the sage. "By this sign is he known, being of equal grace to comrades, friends, chance comers, strangers, lovers, enemies, aliens, and kinsmen, loving all alike, evil or good. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind." Om, Om, Om. As I mentioned before, we're having a discipleship ceremony today, and also the topic for today I've chosen is, do you need a guru? It's actually not this week's topic from the book, but it was last week's topic. But we didn't have a talk last week, so I thought I could steal it without anyone noticing. And here I have gone and confessed my crime. Oh well. So it is amazing to see sometimes the challenge with which people respond when this question of guru comes up. Someone asked Swami Kriyananda rather challengingly, "Do I need a guru?" You know, he was a very successful businessman, and he just, this was in India, and he was rather proud of himself and having accomplished so much, so it seemed. He, and for whatever reason, said, "You think I need a guru? And Swamiji said, "Of course not." He said, "You don't need a guru." He said, "It's only if you want to find God that you need a guru. Until then, go on being your own guru." And the man, sort of like, yes, that's sort of, it kind of left him pondering. But he went, that momentary self-questioning passed, and he went back to his usual ways. Interesting story about that man. Years later, his wife became very ill. And he was a very tough cookie, you could say, but when it came to his wife, he was very sensitive. And she became so ill, they were in the hospital, and in the hospital, unfortunately, they gave her the wrong combination of drugs, which caused her skin to deteriorate rapidly. I won't go into all the gory details, but it was horrific. And here she was, that became much worse than the illness that she had started with. And the doctor said, "I'm so sorry, but there's nothing we can do." And so his daughter was a devotee, and he put out a prayer request through her. Of course, it was her mother, and so we were all aware of it, and we all were praying for her. And so was Swamiji, and so were many other people around the world not associated with Ananda. And within a few days, her condition not only stopped deteriorating, but reversed itself. And the doctor said, "This is impossible. Once this kind of process starts happening, there's no way for it to be recovered." And they didn't know what to say. And this man was overwhelmed, because he who had felt he was above the law in all things, and then found himself, as he said, helpless. In the face of her illness and her condition, there was nothing he could do. He could write all the checks in the world. He could sign all the things into law. He could be the VVIP, and with all the police surrounding him, and yet nothing he could do in this situation. And yet prayer, including from Swami Kriyananda, was a contributing factor. I don't at all mean to say because we prayed she was cured. This is one thing that one has to be very careful about healing prayers, of thinking that I am the healer. That healing energy flows through to the person from many sources. Recently we were praying for someone and also I was asking a few people to help the person, and they couldn't help the person, but the person was helped anyway through some other means. And so we don't know exactly how. Maybe it's just enough cries go up and God says to Master, will you just hush them? Will you just help them so they'll stop, please, 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 please. I'm joking. But still, it does seem like it matters, that it helps, because it's energy put out. When we pray, it's good to pray. Divine Mother, help this situation, bring your light, bring your presence, manifest your healing presence in their bodies, minds, and souls, is not the same thing as saying cure them. Because we don't know what her will is. We don't know the highest good. We don't know the destiny of that soul. I have to admit, though, that once Master prayed for his friend's father who was dying. This is an autobiography of a yogi. And Sri Yukteswar said, what can I do? This man is closed to all help. He is, he's filled with tuberculosis, I think it was, and so he's about to die. And it's the right thing. It's the natural sort of outcome of his karma. And Master said, please, but my friend is so upset. And Sri Yukteswarji said, very well, for your sake, I will extend his life by 6 months. And Master writes, I was so touched that Sri Yukteswar responded just to me, that for me, he did this for my friend. It was really beautiful. Master didn't say, if it is God's will, I do think we should say that. And Swamiji said that all the time, and Master did too. But in that case, it was implicit perhaps, because if it wasn't God's will, Sri Yukteswar wouldn't have done it. But still, we should understand that God can be prevailed upon. Another story with Sri Yukteswar is his friend Shashi, Master's friend Shashi. This is Shashi and the Three Sapphires, came to Sri Yukteswar and would always be very devoted. And yet, he wouldn't really trouble himself to do many of the things that Sri Yukteswar said. This is a problem that all the gurus have, that people will say, yes, Master, and yet they inside are saying, only if I agree, Master. Sri Yukteswar was teasing Shashi about not doing anything. Why do you trouble yourself to follow my advice? Jesus said, why do you say to me, Lord, Lord? Meaning calling as if he's the Lord of them. And he said, and yet not do the things that I say. Do you go to the king and say, Lord, Lord, but then just say, how's it going, king? And you know what, never mind. No, you better watch out, because you don't know what's going to happen. We don't really have that now. It comes in the form of the ITO. The deadline is July 31st. You better link your Aadhaar with PAN by then, or else. And we, what's the website income tax filing? You see, we panic. You don't, because you will be subject to a fine of up to 5,000 rupees, even for thinking of not filing your tax return. You see? So we dance to that. That's the Lord, Lord we have now. And that's what Jesus was saying. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do the things that I say? If you call me Lord, mean it, which means do. And he wasn't saying call him Lord. He was saying do the things that I say. Why? Because they are for your own sake. That's it. As Master said, if you go to a doctor with an illness, whether you have the illness, and the doctor gives you a prescription, and you say thank you very much and crumple it up and throw it away, what good will it do you? Similarly, what good will it do you to take it very sacredly and then frame it and hang it on the wall with a garland and do arati to it? Nothing. He said, the guru is your spiritual doctor. You must follow his advice to get well. for you yourself to get well. That's all he's interested in. As Master said, the Guru has come to make you what he is. Not necessarily a guru in the same way of others, but to have that same realization that he has. And yes, in time, naturally, as that light grows within you, people will be attracted to it. God will send you others to help. But it's better for that to come naturally. In fact, this is one thing Swamiji, who had every right. Do you mind moving this to the side there just so people can see Swamiji more easily? Swami Kriyananda had every right to call himself a guru, and he never did. He always said, I am a disciple of Paramhansa Yogananda. Master told him he would find God at the end of his life. Did that mean the last moment of life, the last breath? Did it mean the last few years? Did it mean the last 80 years of his life? I don't know. But whether someone was self-realized or months away from becoming self-realized, from our perspective, it doesn't really matter. It amounts to being self-realized. But I say that because of the energy that we felt from him, the power that we felt from him. But he always referred it back to Master. He said, it's Master flowing through me. Don't take it from me. Someone once said, can I touch your feet? He said, as long as you know that it's Master through me. And then he always said, as I said, he always referred to his master. Master always referred back to God. He said, it's not me, it's God through me. He said, look to God. He prayed to God. He always was referring people's devotion. He even put his hand like this, saying, any devotion directed at me, I redirect up to God. And the disciples would understand that it was God through him. But it doesn't mean it was either Master or God. It was Master and God. Sure, Master was just the window through which we saw God coming. But you can't help but love the window through which you see. You can't help it. And also, this is what surprised me once. I know that I'm in the middle of a story that I haven't finished yet. So, Shashi and the three sapphires. Woof, let's finish him off first. Okay, so Shashi would not trouble himself to do anything that Sri Yukteswar said. And so one day Sri Yukteswar said, you should wear a blue sapphire. You're about to have some difficult karma, and this blue sapphire would help greatly to reduce it. And Shashi said, oh, Master, I can't afford such things, and your grace is enough to help me. And Sri Yukteswar was basically saying, look, yes, I'm telling you what to do. I'm right here saying, this is what you do. No, Master, your grace, your grace. He was resisting. Swamiji said people would do the same thing to him. They would come to him, ask for advice. He would give them some advice that perhaps they didn't like, and they would say, whatever Master wants. He said, and a glaze would come over the eyes, and they would withdraw. You see, it's a way of saying, no, I don't feel like it, but pretending it's spiritual. You see, again, they had asked for advice. He wouldn't go up to someone and say, hey, you should do this, ever. He wouldn't give advice unless asked. I gave someone lots of advice on the spiritual path when I was new. I hadn't yet learned. I sat down with someone, they sort of said, hi, and I took that to mean that they were asking for advice. And so I gave all kinds of advice. And the more I said, the sort of more irritated the other face became. And I thought, oh, maybe I just haven't made it clear enough. So then I went on and on and on in the face until practically it was finished. And so afterwards I realized I had done something wrong when the person got up to leave, and I said, okay, goodbye, and put out my arms to hug them. And the hug I got was basically like, this possibly going to be a hug around the neck with the hands. And so I thought, I think I've done something wrong. And I went to Dhyanaji and I said, Dhyanaji, how do you give advice? She said, I don't. So I began to dawn on me, something needs learning here. And so anyway, going back to Sri Yukteswar and Shashi. So Sri Yukteswar said another time, he said, in the future you will bring 3 sapphires, but it will be too late. And Shashi went, ha, 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 and didn't think seriously of it. And some months went by, and Shashi got very ill, And then one day when Master was with Sri Yukteswar, they heard someone coming, and Sri Yukteswar stiffened and said, "It's that Shashi, tell him I don't want to see him." And so Master came. And Sri Yukteswar said, "He's very ill, but tell him I don't want to see him." Master went out and he met Shashi, and Shashi said, "Oh, Mukunda, I'm so happy to see you. And is Sri Yukteswar here?" And Master said, "He doesn't want to see you." And Shashi pushed Master out of the way, crying, ran to Sri Yukteswar's feet, laid out the 3 sapphires that he had brought, and said, "Please help me. The doctors say there's no hope for me." I don't remember the illness this time. Does anyone remember? Maybe that was tuberculosis too. Who knows? It's something. And I think they said already, "Both my lungs are gone," he said, Shashi said. And Sri Yukteswar basically didn't say anything. Or I don't remember what he said, but he did not respond. And then he just sat there for a long time. And Shashi just wept and wept and wept. And Sri Yukteswar was just coldly ignoring him or meditating. And Master said, a realization dawned on me that Master was only testing Shashi. And you see, this is something that when God appears not to answer, when Master appears not to answer, sometimes they're only testing us. They're saying, "I will not help." Looking to see, what do we do? "Oh, okay, all right." Or do we say, "Too bad, you have to help me. You're the only one who can." Someone had a dream once when they were starting a new job that was pretty overwhelming of Swamiji. And Swamiji said in their dream, "What are your plans?" And the person started saying, "Well, I talked to this person and that person, and they had these ideas." And Swamiji just looked at him, and he realized that Swamiji was saying, "What are your plans?" Not what are other people suggesting. And the man in the dream, his own dream, didn't really have anything to say. And Swamiji said, "It isn't as if I'm just going to pour ideas into your head." And then he added, "Well, maybe a little." You see, they will. I don't know if it was a superconscious dream or not, but the man said he felt changed from that dream. The masters will do this. They'll say, "Stand on your own 2 feet. I'm not going to help you." And that's what Sri Yukteswar was doing with Shashi. And finally, Sri Yukteswar said, "Oh, Shashi, what a commotion you make in other people's homes. Get out and go see the doctors. Even now you are well." Something like that. Forgive me. You should read it in the book. It's much better, more clearly told. And Shashi was well. He was cured. And so it's so beautiful to see the power and the presence of the Guru, because the Guru told him, "Do what I say, get the sapphire," and he didn't. And he told him, "You're going to bring 3 sapphires, which should be enough. Look, 1 sapphire is cheaper than 3. Just buy it now." Trying to get him to follow it. No, Master. Your grace will help me. Your grace will help me. You see what a useless attitude that is? There's a proverb in, I think it's among the Native American Indians that says, "Call on God, but row away from the rocks." Be practical. And just saying, "Okay, God will help me," and so on. Especially when God in the form of the Guru is right in front of you, telling you. And saying, no, God will help me. And so then when Shashi brought the 3 sapphires, Sri Yukteswar wouldn't cure him. And then he did. You see? It wasn't a law that once you break, that's it, you're in jail now. He still cured him, despite not following any of the advice. But Master added in the story that Shashi, so embarrassed by his behavior, never saw Sri Yukteswar again. He met Master and told him, "I'm too embarrassed to see him." And Master said his miraculous healing left him with an ungrateful tinge. You see? Here it was Sri Yukteswar had saved his life, and here he said, "Oh, I feel so embarrassed for my behavior." And so then he never saw him again? We can perhaps understand this. People will feel that. I feel, since I wronged him, I don't want him to see my face again. But that was much worse. And that's what we have to understand. We don't want, in that way, we turn away from the Guru when we feel, oh, he doesn't want to see me, oh, I've done so much wrong. There was someone who made a mistake during a Sunday service that put Swami Kriyananda in somewhat of an embarrassing position, basically unintentionally embarrassed him. This was long ago. And then the next Sunday, that person didn't come to Sunday service. And Swamiji said, where's so-and-so? And someone said, well, she's so embarrassed about what she had done last week. She's just not able to come now. And Swamiji said, what ego? He said, of course we're going to do things wrong. We're all going to do things wrong. There's nothing she has to feel badly about for that. I heard him in a talk say, listen, we're not perfect yet. You are probably going to be wrong 50, and I thought he was going to say 50% of the time. He said 50 times a day. You see? Every thought that isn't about God, in one sense, is oops. You could think of it that way. It doesn't mean that it's wrong, dark, sinful. Don't take that. I don't mean it that way. I just mean check the mirror. If there's a smile, you're doing fine, as long as it's not a crazy smile. And if there's not a smile, there's a problem. You see? It's amazing sometimes to me how it's so clearly reflected in the face. But what I wanted to talk a little bit about was with Swamiji, that, as I said, Master was a window unto God, and Swamiji was a window unto Master, unto God. There's a lot of relationships the Guru can have with the disciple. As I said, here Yoganandaji is the Guru, and yet we can't help but also relate the experiences that we had of Yogananda through Swamiji. Because he said this is the duty of every disciple, to make the Guru real to others. This is our duty too, to make the Guru real to others. Perhaps by talking about him, perhaps by giving autobiography of a yogi. This was Yoganandaji's advice. He said, you can preach. Preach through the autobiography. Give it to others. And he added, and they will be saved. And that's quite a promise. And we see it. People just came to level 1 yesterday, and a number of them were saying, I'm reading the book, and then others were saying, I have the book. Does that count? I haven't yet read it, but even giving it, you said, one gave it to me, and I have it on my shelf. And then I saw the ad on Facebook, and so I came to the class. And so even in that, even without reading the book, they hopefully will find some help in their lives. The Guru, so I went to this other story of where I was saying that there was a man I met. This was connected to something earlier that I said and made perfect sense, but I can't remember what that was. But maybe you can rewind this talk and then link this. But there was a man who was giving a talk at a business conference, and I was rather impressed with this man. He was sort of good looking, he was charming, he was an older man, he was wiser, it seemed. He was sharing these things, and he had a whole grace about him again, so I thought. And I wondered, maybe he would be interested in knowing that in addition to doing these corporate workshops for Ananda, that we have a spiritual side to our organization as well. Because he had such a magnetism that I thought I mistook it for openness to God. And so I was trying to approach him at the lunch break to sort of say, excuse me, sir, and I heard him talking to someone else. And in talking to I was waiting my turn, and in talking to that other person, somehow I think it was, maybe it was Ramdev or one of the gurus who was extremely popular just at that time. This was about 10 years ago. He came up in conversation, and this man who I was admiring said, and these gurus, my gosh, how all these mindless followers are after them and so on. How do they inspire this fanatical devotion in so many people? And so I turned away and went back to the lunch line because I knew he wouldn't be open to what I had to say. And it surprised me because someone who was doing so well, so it seemed on so many levels in this regard, was completely shut. But I had to admit, when I was approaching the spiritual path, I too was unsure of whether I should take discipleship to Yoganandaji, and so on. Could we close that door? Just, is that all right? Every time something happens, all the... I feel like I should also... Enache, yare? So, okay. I was not open to a guru. And yet it was also because I had not found anyone who inspired me in that way. I had many inspiring teachers. And actually I wanted to be a professor and a mathematician and a computer scientist. And yet none of them awakened in me this sense of a complete life. I was attracted to certain aspects of their lives, my heroes, but not all aspects. And in particular, I didn't see that what they were doing was necessarily making them happy. And that concerned me. And then I met Swamiji. I had already become a spiritual, entered the spiritual path. I'd become a disciple. I'd taken Kriya. But when I met Swami Kriyananda, having read his books, heard his lectures, seen his videos, I had had a lot of interaction with him. But when I was sitting in the temple in the front row and he was entering the back of the temple, as soon as the doors opened, I felt as if they had been blown off, as if there was an explosion. There wasn't anything to indicate that, but that was just the feeling that I had. And I saw him coming, just striding strongly. He had been ill, and they said he might not even lead the satsang today. And at the last minute he did. But I thought if he was ill, he might sort of be limping in. Nothing like that. He was walking, just not even like a general, just like a king. But it wasn't just the way he looked or acted. It was the power that I felt coming from him. It was the joy. It was the bliss. I didn't know what to call it, but I felt enlivened like I had never felt before in the presence of anyone. And that made an impression on me. And that made me instantly interested in him. And it also made me drawn to him. And in time, that grew into love. It took a while. It wasn't immediate because I couldn't even realize the gift that I had in him. I wanted to share with you a few stories of how the Guru came through Swamiji. And because I think these can be helpful, because we can talk about, do you need a guru? But almost everyone here has answered that question already for themselves. In fact, everyone has. And so, rather than debate that question, let's talk about what happens after you say, yes, I do. Then what? Master was always catching Swamiji's thoughts. At one time he said to Swamiji, I know every thought you think. But we saw that Swamiji would do that with us too, in different ways. One person was praying to Swamiji, one person, Dharmini. Dharmini and I had a question for Swamiji, and we decided to send him an email to ask him. And after we sent the email, we were meditating together, and after the meditation, she turned to me and said, Swamiji doesn't want it. And I said, let's check the email. Has he written back? He hasn't written back. I don't see an answer. And I think he does want it, because I want it. And anyway, we won't know until he sends the email. Let's not have negative expectations here. So a week later, we met Swamiji in a group. And he turned to us and said, I got your email, and I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to reply. And he turned to Dharmini and said, but I think you got the answer in your meditation. And so she smiled. I looked at the ground, and somebody standing next to us went, just because he openly acknowledged that. Swamiji did not do that often. He did not often say things like that. And I had another experience where Swamiji arrived after being away out of the country for a long time, and many of us went to the airport to greet him. And we were in this big crowd of probably, at least 40 people, all standing in a circle where he arrived and so on. And he was, he couldn't really say, hello, hello, hello. Hello, to 40 people, all individually, he said, so nice to see you all, and so on. But then he would acknowledge one or two, nice to see you in particular. And he would say that particularly to someone. And I was sitting there kind of, because I hadn't seen him in a long time, and I really wanted to see him, and I didn't, trying to get his attention, but I couldn't help it. I wanted to, and I had missed him so much. And so that broke up, and we went to the luggage thing or whatever it was. In those days, you could go into the airport to meet somebody. And then right when he was about to leave, and the seconds were ticking away, and I wasn't going to have any more chances, in my mind, I cried out with love to him. And he was looking like this at the people, and as he went like this, he turned right back and looked right at me, right when I did that, and he said, "How are you?" And the look in his eye was sweet, but it was also somewhat, I felt like he was correcting me, saying, do you really need me to sit here and say, do you have to make such a loud noise, and so on? And I realized that he was saying, you can feel a connection, even if it isn't constantly acknowledged. Hello, yes, I'm so glad you're here, and I'm still glad you're here, and tomorrow I'll be glad to see you again, and so on. But it is true. Swamiji was, I have little notes here. Swamiji was recording programs on the Bhagavad Gita. And he was doing 5 in a session, then another 5 after, and then another 5 after. Each one was about 17 minutes, and with the break about 20 minutes. So he was doing these, it was 15 Gita commentaries in a day on film. It was grueling, very difficult. And he was doing it from inspiration. Understandably, he didn't have notes and wasn't planning out. He was going from the Gita, of course, in order. But after, I don't know, maybe 100 shows or something, somebody pulled me aside and said, he's starting to repeat himself. He's telling stories that he's already told. And I was confused by that, because for me, I had seen, this was near the end of Swamiji's life, and I had learned by now that what Swamiji did was right. And if it wasn't right, according to me, I found out later that I was wrong. Even amazing things that seemed, just a direct contradiction of the facts. I'm trying to think of an example right now. I can't at the moment. But where he would say, no, but that's not what's happening. And then that's what would happen. Completely against all of the common sense and so on. So I didn't know what to say to this person, and I also didn't like this sort of energy of, he's doing something wrong that we need to correct or something. I thought, look, we don't know what he's doing. Let's trust it and go with it. Besides, it's so wonderful. The second time, the third time, the fourth time, the same story. Who cares? But I didn't have a clear thought about that. And in the very next video that Swamiji was prepared to film, he was taking a break, and he said, and I know I repeat myself in these programs. He said, Krishna repeats himself in the Gita. He says many of the same things over and over again. People need repetition in order to get the point. And he said, and besides, not everyone is going to see every single program, and they may miss one here or there, or they may be, this he said in response to somebody coughing during one of his film sessions, which was completely, you were not supposed to make any noise, obviously. And so somebody made no, it wasn't coughing. It was like some workers outside suddenly started hammering on something, and we had said, don't work at this time. It was our workers, after all. And so there was some noise that somebody had to run out and stop, and he said, I know there was a noise, but people are going to be watching these things at home with, their neighbor's mixie going off and someone else's puja bell and the traffic outside, so they may not even hear, this particular sound going on. And so that same thought, someone was giving him, he was asking for cashews, and someone who was bringing them to me passed me and said, he keeps asking for cashews, but they make him cough, and then he coughs during the filming. And then, but she didn't say anything to him. And then she brought him the cashews. And then before the next video, he said, "And I know the cashews make me cough, and it doesn't matter because I want them anyway." And it was amazing to me how he would catch people's thoughts and acknowledge them. Why does it matter? You could say, what's the difference between someone saying, "The cashews make you cough," and he says, "But I want them anyway," versus someone thinking that? I mean, does it really matter whether someone thought it or said it? I mean, it can be kind of magical at first. Oh, so he caught someone's thought, but after all, it was just a conversation. What it showed us was that he was in touch with us internally. It showed us that he was listening. It showed us that he could hear us. And it showed us that even if he didn't respond immediately, respond directly to what we were thinking, that he was still responding. In other words, if he didn't outwardly acknowledge it, but he responded, that he was catching that thought. As Master said of a saint in Autobiography of a Yogi, "The saint, ignoring my question, answered my thought." And that's what Swamiji would do all the time. One of our friends here had that experience with Swamiji. He was really wanting to ask Swamiji in a satsang, "Why do you say Hong Sa and not So Hum?" No, was that it? Or it was the other. No, it was the other. He really wanted to ask, why do you say we are in Dwapara Yuga when all the saints say we are in Kali Yuga? But at the last minute, his courage failed him, and so he instead pulled out the other common question, why is it Hong Sa and not So Hum? And so Swamiji answered that question and gave, I don't want to go into it all right now, but he gave that answer, and then he said, in fact, in this age of Dwapara Yuga, and we are in Dwapara Yuga now, not Kali Yuga, and the reason is, and he went on to this whole explanation, how he got from Hong Sa to Dwapara Yuga, I don't remember. And this man was shocked, because it's exactly what was really on his mind. And so, I would like to go on in this vein, and I should, but unfortunately we've run out of time for today.